Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Modular. Today we're having a look at the 7th Summoner. This is the third module from FlatSix in this style of 1U module, which is essentially a little piano keyboard, a little button keyboard with just a couple of features around it. And it's an entire DSP platform sitting behind this panel, which has allowed FlatSix to develop 3 different firmwares which somehow pull an extraordinary amount of functionality from this little panel. The first one was sleight of hand. That was simple. It was just a piano keyboard. You played notes, notes came out. Brilliant. You could use it for just selecting a pitch, drones, or literally playing something within your rack. The next one was the Art of Darkness. I did a bit of video on that, and it has been, I think, one of the most brilliant modules I've come along in a long time. For me, it's so instant and improvisational and inspirational. I used it at the synths gig last week, the other week, whenever it was. It's right there, and you just stab a few notes in and it starts to loop, and you add some more and they drop in and drop out. It's not an arpeggiator in the traditional sense. It's just a way of building up notes, and it's simple and it's easy and it's fluid, and it just brings the delight of melody straight into your rack. It's quite remarkable. Really. The third one, the 7th Summoner, alarming names. I love the names. The naming convention, I think, is really part of it. But anyway, is a sequencer, and so it takes a little bit more thought than the Art of Darkness. It has a little bit more of a preamble. You have to program it, you have to put sequences in, but then within its space, sort of snuggled away in your 1U row, it becomes phenomenally useful. So in this video, I'm going to tell you what I think about the 7th Summoner. If you haven't guessed already, I mean, it has some awesome pros, but also there's a lot missing. I mean, it's a sequencer, and yet there's so much of what we've come to expect within a sequencer that it doesn't have, that makes it quite uniquely sparse and simplistic, but that is also its strength. And hopefully I'll be able to show you why it works really well, and also all the things it doesn't have, so that you can make a decision as to whether that's a useful thing to have in your rack or not. Because that's what it's all about. This is all about trying to describe usefulness. How well is this going to fit into your workflow, if at all? Or is it just purely interesting? I don't know. So I guess what we'll do is I'll bring you in. I mean, it's a simple module, so this is not going to be one of my longest ever videos. It should be relatively simple and straightforward. I'll just talk you through what it does and talk about whether that's a good thing or not. Sound all right? Okay. So here we have the 7th Summoner. It is the same module as the Art of Darkness. You've got the Art of Darkness sitting next to it, which is, identical to it in every way, except some of the front panel printing is slightly different in order to pick out the different functionality. You can probably already imagine what it does. The keyboard helps you program in the notes. You've then got some writing underneath these keys and a nice big fat shift button, which lets you shift between sequencers. It can hold up to 6 sequencers. It then has a summoner mode, again playing on the name, which allows you to chain up to 16 sequences together in order to form a bit of a song. You've got playback modes at the top here. You've got octave jump, and this is also play and record, and this knob is glide and or time division. Over here you have gate and CV. Now the gate is an input. It's essentially the clock. I don't really know why it's called gate, but it takes a pulse, and every pulse moves it along another note. And then you've got the CV output here. Now what you may notice immediately is that there's no gate out, and we can talk about that, but let me turn on a sequence and just sort of talk our way through that. So I've got a bunch of sort of 4-note sequences programmed in, and I can shift between them. Very, very simple. I can transpose by using the keyboard. Ooh! I can also octave up and down. No, I can't all the way down, so I can only go up. If I bring my oscillator down a bit. So there it is, super. I'm using sequences, I'm swapping between them on the fly, very easy, very straightforward. Now as I say, it doesn't have a gate output, and so if I was to program something, if I for instance select one over here, if I was to put that into record mode and just record a bunch of C's, it would just play in one long line because there's no gate, there's no separation between those notes as far as we can hear, because there's no gate output. There's purely a pitch output. So we only hear that pitch if it changes. And so you may think in terms of a sequencer, well, there should be ties and there should be rests. But there isn't, there's no need for there to be if there's no gate system within the sequencer itself. This is both something that's sort of missing, but also something that encourages you to use gating elsewhere. If I record another sequence into here and actually put some notes in, it is changing the pitch of my lovely oscillator down here. But you don't get that definition of a step until you add a gate from somewhere else. So I'm going to take an output from something here, throw in a few gates for it. So it turns not having a gate into an advantage because it pushes you to go somewhere else and stick those in yourself. Great, simple, straightforward. Now let me show you how you record and play back a sequence very simply. So all you do is, you have to go through a little bit of finger gymnastics here because you have this shift button here and you have these modes and different things going on. And so there's inevitably a little bit of learning required in order to get your head around what is exactly happening. But it actually becomes easier once you've gone through it a couple of times, because in the instructions it said you've got to hold shift, you've got to hold play to put it into play mode, and then you have to hold shift and put it in record to put it in record mode, and so on and so forth. But actually when you're in play mode you don't need to put it back into play mode. That's just assuming that you've been somewhere else doing something else and you need to reset back to where you're going. So assuming we're in play mode, I'm just going to select a sequence, so the first one, on this case, and then I put it into record, and it's now ready. It's ready to expect a sequence. Now this program's in an SH101 style, so you put in a bunch of notes and then you set it playing. It doesn't record in real time. I would love it to record in real time. It does not. You just program your notes in, and as I said, no ties, no rests, because that is going to be defined elsewhere. So all you want is your notes, up to 32, or you can just do a handful. That'll do. And once you've programmed your notes, you hold shift and press play again, and it's stored and should start playing. Oh look, I turned my gate off. Look, I turned my gate off. See, one of the things it doesn't have is an LED to show you that things are working. Could really do with one. So I've got this illuminated cable here coming from my gate. I need to turn that on. Take my filter gating enveloping out for the moment and just hear the notes. So did I like that? I don't know, maybe. So I'm going to shift record again. It sort of pauses. I can now put in a bunch more notes. When it stops, you've reached 32 notes. Shift and play in order to store it. If I wanted to, you go to the second sequence, hit record and do something slightly different. Now the mistake that I make all the time is that I'm assuming it's recording the rhythm that I put these things in with. It's a very common SH101 type mistake, and it's not. That rhythm has nothing to do with it. It's just a string of notes. So I think I'm doing something clever, and actually it will just play back it in a complete stream. And I can shift easily back to the first one. Back to the second. It's just so simple. It's mind-bogglingly simple. So let's have a look at the playback modes, and to do that I'm just going to program in something relatively simple. So this is going forward, shift, and then goes backwards. Ping pong. Got random over here. Then you've got this golden arc, what's it called? Golden something. Golden ratio. Golden ratio. That's the word I'm after. Golden ratio. Now this uses something I think called a Fibonacci sequence, some kind of little bit of maths which decides on the next note based on the golden ratio, that sort of thing, that spiral, that set of curves that somehow describes the entire nature of organic matter. It's using that to decide on the next note. So it's not really random. It has a much more sort of pleasing movement to it, and ultimately kind of a continuously evolving, non-repeatable vibe. Different gates from the Pamela's Pro workout over here. Now, because this is an SH101 style sequence, I have no ability to edit that sequence. I can't go back in and change a note or take a note out or anything like that. It doesn't work like that. It is a matter of programming in your sequence and then letting that fly, and then coming up with a bunch of different ones and variations and then putting them together. That's generally the idea. And so if you're someone who prefers to fiddle individually with notes, I mean, for instance, if we were to look up to the oct here, the octone, this sequencer, this works in a very different way. You are setting pitches on each individual step with these individual knobs, and because it's not really musically related, you are just turning a dial and finding a note. There's a far greater opportunity for accidental discovery and the evolving of a sequence and the turning on and off of steps. You know, that's a whole different experience to this, to the seventh summoner. It's a very different vibe. So in here, I'm creating a sequence and letting it go. I'm using a musical keyboard, which is absolutely going to dominate the way in which I'm constructing a melody. Whereas in something like the octone, the melody is constructed kind of a bit more randomly, a bit more accidentally, a bit more organically, perhaps. And that is definitely a difference that you feel when using a keyboard-based sequencer as opposed to a knob-based modular sequencer. Right, let's have a go at the summoner thing, the chaining of sequences. Let's try. I've now done this many times and still can't seem to come up with decent sequences, but I'm going to try this time to come up with something which makes sense that we can then chain together. Right, okay, got it? So I'm going to choose the first sequence, go into record. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Fine. Save it. Second sequence. Save it. Third sequence. Record. So I've got sequence 1, sequence 2, sequence 3. Okay, that'll do, we'll go with that. So, to go into summoner mode, you hold shift, press summoner, and then shift record to go into record mode. Then you use shift to select your sequence. So there's my first sequence. In order to commit that to the step, I then have to double tap shift. I then choose the next one. Double tap. Now I'm going to go back to sequence 1, but I'm going to transpose it. Double tap that. Sequence 2. I'm going to give that a different playback mode. And confirm that. And then when I'm ready to go, hold shift and push up. So now we have those being chained together. Let's do something slightly different with that. So I'm in summoner mode, go into record, I'm going to select the first sequence. So I'm going to put that in once, so I double tap, then I'm going to select it again, and I'm going to put it in backwards, double tap, I'm going to put it in again, forwards, an octave down, or an octave up. Let's do that, an octave up. Double tap, put it in again, put it in backwards, double tap, put it in again, put it in forwards, transpose it over here. Put it in again, transpose it there. Put it in again, put it in backwards and forwards, put it down. Did you get all of that? Save it, then it should do it. does also have built-in clock division. If I double tap shift, come back into play mode and just play my first sequence. There you go. I think that's probably enough. I think that's probably plenty of playing with a seventh summoner in order to get across, I think, what it does. For me, ultimately, it's like having this secret stash of sequences just stuck in this little bit of no man's land in your Euro rack. Because I don't know about you, but the 1U row, there's good utilities and bits and pieces, but there's less value in there than there is in the rest of your rack, I tend to find. And so I'm trying to find a really good way of using it. And these little modules, well, quite wide modules actually, fit in really nicely. They suddenly invest a whole load of value into that 1U row that wasn't there previously. It's become very, very useful. Very, very useful. And so, in the middle of a set, you've got other things going on. You're making things, you're doing stuff, you're working hard on various sequences and bits and pieces going on. You're randomly generating and morphing and all those sorts of things. But then you need something else. You need to move to something else, something perhaps which is programmed, something which is going to allow you time to repatch and to redo something else. It could be a transition. It could just be something that you move to without it being, a ground control or a black sequencer or something big and enormous. It could just be this little selection of melodies that you can drop in at any point. And you can move between them, you can do a little bit of transposition, or you can just program the summoner just to do the lot for you, to have a little run of stuff going on that you don't have to worry about. That, I think, is really, really good. So there you are. I mean, it's simple. There's masses missing from a regular sequencer, like the per step editing, automation, accents, gate outputs, gate patterns, all that stuff. Yeah, I know, all that stuff is missing. But that is what makes the seventh summoner that little bit special, because it's simple. It's not going to take over your rack. It's not going to be everything in all places for all things, but it just brings a simplicity of melody and intention that was just simply not there before. I fiddle a lot with sequencers. I like individual sequences. I like that. That's very much my way of doing things. And this just fits into that paradigm perfectly. What I have to balance that against is how these FlatSix modules are pulling me into the keyboard paradigm all the time. Because I know full well that I create different sequences when I have a keyboard in front of me than when I do with just a selection of knobs. With knobs, I sort of lean in and you work it out, and you adjust and you push things around and you find things. You go, oh wow, that's brilliant, I'll let that run for a bit, and then you find something else. That is your knob-based exploratory sequencer. With a keyboard in front of you, you go, oh, I want those notes. And that's great, because that creates this instant musical thing, this instant musical theme, this attachment, but it is very, very intentional. And so you tend to get into this a little bit intentional mindset where you are programming notes as opposed to exploring and discovering melody. Does that make sense? I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying that the presence of a keyboard means that I approach it differently and I ultimately get different things out. And in some ways it's going to challenge my musicality, because I tend to end up favouring the same thing over and over again that I know that works. So I tend to do like C minor 7 or A minor 7s, or I don't even know what the terms are. I just end up pressing C, F, G, B flat, maybe an A. I don't know. That tends to be what I go for, and so the keyboard encourages that and feeds into that same cul-de-sac of music. So on the one hand, it's incredibly freeing and easy and something that you can have saved up just to dump out there, and it's fun to play with as well. There's that on the other hand. Another way of looking at it is that it's taken me down a musical road that I don't necessarily want to go down. So there are definitely some pros and cons to using this kind of thing. But gosh darn it, it makes things easy. It's the same with the Harp of Darkness. The Harp of Darkness, very, very similar idea, in that I can just plug that into an oscillator, I can bash in some notes, and it's going to sound good. I'm not running a Turing machine through a quantizer in order to try to extract some kind of randomizing probabilistic melody. I can just flip input the melody in, and I know it's going to sound sweet. But those two things, those approaches, you can tell that I'm wrestling with this as I'm talking about it, because I'm pulled in different directions in how I want this to be and how I want it to go, and what it is that I like about modular. I like the discovery. I like the finding a melody. However, I'm really enjoying punching a melody in. So I'm a person of contradictions. What can I say? I think that's inevitable, really. So that, in a nutshell, in a huge, ginormous nutshell, is the FlatSix 7th Summoner. It's gonna, undoubtedly, I've got 3 of them in my rack at the moment. I think 2's enough. I think, I say that, but during the gig at Synth East, right, I used the Harp of Darkness, but then I used another Harp of Darkness, because I have 2 in there, and I used them both, because I had, one of them was running something, and then I wanted to patch the other one in to run something else. And because it's musical keyboards, I could very easily put them together in a related fashion. The 7th Summoner is slightly different because it has this storage of melodies as opposed to instant finding of melodies as you do with the Harp of Darkness. So they do have a different thing. I'm tempted to leave the 7th Summoner and 2 Harp of Darknesses in there. I am. Because I know that I can get a lot out of them in a 15 to half an hour set, I really think I can. So yeah, some thoughts there, some thoughts and bumbling on with all of that. I'm fascinated to see what they come up with next over at FlatSix. I would love there to be a real-time mode where you can sort of set it looping, so you choose how many notes, 16 notes, 8 notes. Maybe you hold something and turn that knob, and that selects 4 notes, 8 notes, 16 notes, 32 notes, and then it rotates round, and you just add notes every now and again, and it just stays on whatever note you press last, because again, you don't have that gating engine, and that brings in limitations, while at the same time, as I say, pushing you into doing something interesting elsewhere. Or am I just making excuses for it? Maybe, but it's fascinating me, this DSP platform, and how they are pulling functionality out of that, considering the restraints of the hardware interface. That is even interesting in of itself. So cool, yeah, I could talk about it for days, and you'll probably see me using it a lot in the coming months whenever I'm doing stuff. I don't see them going anywhere at all. I hope that was helpful, and in the meantime, go and make some tunes.